Welcome to Wicked Shizuku's Reviews, bringing you a southern perspective on books, movies, music, and much, much more. Stick around for a while, you just might hear something wicked. So, hi everyone. We just might be interrupted right at the very beginning of the episode. Welcome to episode 64 of Wicked Shizuku's Reviews. I'm Shizuku, and behind me is our kitties, Ajax and Panda. Like I said, it is episode 64, and I will be continuing on with the Lowell offering, but first, I am going to let Panda out of the house to go to the potty parade. So, everybody, check out the schedule screen, and I'll be right back. Okay, that was actually quite an easy exchange of getting him out of the house and me getting back just in time. So, I will be continuing on with the Lowell offering, starting at the article of Pleasures of Factory Life. Pleasures, did you say? What pleasures in a factory life? From many scenes with which I have become acquainted, I should judge that the pleasures of factory life were like angel visits, few and far between, said a lady whom fortune had placed above labor. Indolence or idleness is not above labor, but below it. EDS. I could not endure such a constant clatter of machinery that I could neither speak to be heard, nor think to be understood, even by myself. And then you have so little leisure. I could not bear such a life of fatigue. Call it by any other name rather than a pleasure. But stop, friend. We have some few things to offer here, and we are quite sure our views of the matter are just. Having been engaged, is quite sure our views of the matter are just. Having been engaged, as an operative the last 4 years, pleasures there are, even in factory life, and we have many, known only to those of like employment. To be sure, it is not so convenient to converse in the mills with those unaccustomed to them, yet we suffer so inconvenience among ourselves. But aside from the talking, where can you find a more pleasant place for contemplation? There are all the powers of the mind are made active by our animating exercise, and having but one kind of labor to perform, we need not give all our thoughts to that, but leave them measurably free for reflection on other matters. The subjects for pleasurable contemplation. This is madness. Wowzers. While attending to our work are numerous and various. Many of them are immediately around us. For example, in the mill, we see displays of the wonderful powerful of the mind, who can closely examine all the movements of complicated, curious machinery, and not be led to the reflection that the mind is boundless and destined to rise higher and still higher, and that it can accomplish almost anything in which it fixes its attention. In the mills, we are not so far from God and nature as many persons might suppose. We cultivate and enjoy much pleasure in cultivating flowers and plants. A large and beautiful variety of plants is placed around the mills of the rooms, the walls of the rooms, giving them more appearance of a flower garden than a workshop. It is there we inhale the sweet perfume of the rose, the lily, and geranium, and with them send sweet incense of sincere gratitude to the bountiful giver of these rich blessings. And who can live with such rich and pleasant source of instruction open to him, and not be wiser and better, and consequently more happy? Another great source of pleasure is, that becoming operatives, we are often enabled to assist aged parents who have become too infirm to provide for themselves, or perhaps to educate some orphan brother or sister, and fit them for future usefulness. And is there no pleasure in this at all? No pleasure in relieving the distressed and removing their heavy burdens? And is there no pleasure in rendering ourselves, by such acts, worthy of the confidence and respect of those with whom we are associated? Another source is found in the fact of our being acquainted with some person or persons that reside in almost every part of the country, and through these we become familiar with some incidents that the greater interest in the scenery, inasmuch as there are gathered pleasant associations about every town and almost every house and tree that meet our view. Let no one suppose that the factory girls are without guardian. We are placed in the care of overseers who feel under moral obligations to look after our interests, and if we are sick, to acquaint themselves with our situations and want, and if we need be, to remove us to the hospital, where we are sure to have the best attendance provided by the benevolence of our agents and superintendents. In Lowell, we enjoy abundant means of information, especially in the way of public lectures. The time of lecturing is appointed to suit the convenience of the operatives, and sad indeed with the picture of our lyceums, institutes, and scientific lecture rooms, if all the operatives should absent themselves. And last, though not least, is the pleasure of being associated with the institutions of religion, and thereby availing ourselves of the library, Bible class, Sabbath school, and all other means of religious instruction. Most of us, when at home, live in the country, and therefore cannot enjoy these privileges to the same extent, and many of us not at all. And surely we ought to regard these as sources of pleasure. S.G.B. Sarah G. Bagley, Series 1, 1880, pages 25 and 26. We have taken the liberty to change several sentences in the preceding article, and to transport 2 of the paragraphs. Hence, the writer might be amplified in the series of illustrations. Who will undertake it? It's, that she definitely seemed like she was on a rampage, did she? So I will be right back after a short break to tell you about plants and flowers in the meadows. So, be right back. And welcome back. And I am going straight into plants and flowers in the mills. In the article entitled Pleasures of Factory Life, mention is made of the cultivation of flowers in the mills. We have been greatly pleased with the taste and care displayed in the introduction and culture of plants and flowers. On all the corporations, these children of nature, whether growing wild or receiving the fostering attention of man, are apt to teach. And the lessons they inculcate are of the purest and most pleasing character, and it is highly gratifying to see them exalted to companionship in the sitting room and parlor, when they most need shelter from the blighting frost. It is especially gratifying to behold them thriving beneath the kindly care of the female operatives in our factories. In the dressing room of number 3 on the Boot Corporation, we counted over 200 pots of plants and flowers. This is probably the largest number congregated in any apartment in the city, and some rooms, in consequence of an entirely northern exposure or inconvenience in other respects, are without any. Nevertheless, a larger or smaller collection may be found in the apartments generally. The superintendents manifest a lively interest in this manner, and some of them have furnished large numbers of plants and flowers, with instructions to the overseers to furnish every facility to the girls for the cultivation thereof, and several proprietors have displayed commendable liberality in sending floral contributions in rich variety to ornament the mills. A few suggestions may not be considered out of place. We design them for every manufacturing district. One, proprietors, owners of stock, and others would confer a favor on the factory population and indirectly benefit themselves by sending a few pots of plants and flowers to the mills. Let every room be generously supplied. The expense and trouble would be trifling. 2. Persons employed in the mills usually visit their kindred at least once a year. On these occasions, let them select a few fine cuttings or roots, and when they return to their stations, mention the fact to an overseer. Pots or boxes would, without doubt, be furnished to every reasonable extent at the expense of the corporation. 3. Let the flowers and plants be carefully attended to. Lessons of wisdom, purity, and holy trust will thence be derived. And when you look on such as you brought from home, remember the love of your kindred and the joys of your childhood, and haply your thoughts will be in harmony with the teachings of the flowers and the alphabet of angels. From the editorial corner in series number 1, or series 1, number 2, 1840, page 32. Seems like they had some interesting papers back then, right? Mm-hmm. Tales of Factory Life, number 1. So this one gets kind of spicy. I kind of looked ahead a little bit while I was making all of my plans to be able to figure out um how to jump ahead a little bit in some of the episodes, because some books like Eothen get very, very long, and I kind of wanted to really dig a little deeper in on this one because I was going to college to be able to try to read this book in the class that I flunked. That's right, I flunked the class. And the teacher, she was so standoffish, and she was just somebody I didn't want to talk to. She was like scary crow woman. I mean, she really was. And there was another student that had more special needs than I did. So, I just took the hit and I was like, okay, just let this kid go ahead and get out of the way because, he's younger than I am. Yeah. So there's a college story for you, everyone. So let's see, three more articles that I have planned out, and I only have like maybe two more breaks to take. So I wish there was a pause button for OBS, but there isn't. I haven't figured it out yet. Well, I'm learning as I'm going. I'm a one-woman show, everybody. Okay, let's go back to the Tales of Factory Life. Number one. Sarah T was scarcely 12 years old when her parents removed to New England. Her education had been neglected, not on account of her inability to learn, but because her parents had been unfortunate and had not means to educate their large family. Her mother had given her the first rudiments of learning and many valuable lessons of domestic economy. Her father's health had far declined, and his days were soon numbered, leaving a widow and 7 orphan children. Miss T's grief was nearly overwhelming. The reflection that she was left among strangers without the means of returning to her friends to her was truly gloomy. After a short period, she found it was necessary to adopt some plan for the support of her children. She solicited advice from some of the few who had interested themselves in her behalf, and it was soon decided that Sarah and a brother still younger should live out. Accordingly, a place was provided for Sarah with a Miss J, who kept what is termed a genteel boarding house in the city, about 5 miles distant. Oh. Miss J was much pleased with Sarah's activity and readiness to obey, and she used every means except the right ones to retain her services, and she was often treated with such severity and sometimes cruelty. She had a proud spirit and could not endure mortification of hearing the daughter of Miss J inquire why she was so meanly clad, and did not attend to school to study French and music. She determined to leave the service of Miss J and find employment where she could procure the means of educating and clothing herself. She had been in the service of Miss J for about 2 years, when the daughter of Miss J commenced to attack upon Sarah about her feelings, about her being so ignorant, and Sarah very frankly told her that she possessed the means of educating herself, and would employ them very soon to that end. Miss J overheard the conversation, and was highly displeased with the resolution Sarah had formed, and gave her many harsh words, calling her a poor little beggar, and company. The proud spirit of Sarah could endure such treatment no longer. She determined to leave, and that night made preparation to depart. Early next morning, Sarah took leave without stopping to bid family goodbye. When the sun arose, she was about 3 miles from the affectionate Mrs. J. She arrived at home in the seasons to breakfast with her mother and her other friends. After breakfast, her mother made inquiries about her unexpected appearance. She very frankly replied, "I have run away from Mrs. J, and I will tell you all." Which she did. Mrs. J soon made her appearance, and she wished Sarah to return to her. Sarah wept bitterly and told her mother she would not stay with her. She was so unkind and made her work so hard, and she would not send her to school, nor give her clothes suitable for attending church. As they were returning, Mrs. J. inquired, "What would have become of you if I had not had the kindness to take you home with me?" Sarah replied, with great simplicity. "I had determined to go to Lowell and work in the factory." "Well, if you are mean enough in your own opinion to be a factory girl, I may as well despair of thinking to make anything of you, first and as last, for it will be of no use to try." "But," said Sarah, "I know of more than one girl who has worked in the factory, who is much better than I ever expect to be, if I stay with you as long as I live. If I should judge by the past." The first business of Mrs. J. after their return was to employ the usual remedies for the removal of the Lowell fever, as she termed it, with which Sarah had been attacked. The preventives were cheap and at hand, for every one possessed them who had read the news of the day. She did not tire in the application, and often gave them effect by a box on the ear, notwithstanding all her caution. The fever raged within, and fears were entertained that it would take her off, and their fears were not groundless. One morning Mrs. J. arose at her usual time, thinking all was well, and the fire was not kindled, nor anyone to be seen about the kitchen. She was in a great rage, and opened the door at the back stairs, and with her usual emphasis on such occasions, exclaimed, "Sarah, come down here this minute. I thought the coffee was boiling before this time, but instead of this, not even a fire is kindled. I would not give a fig for such help. It is just no help at all," closing the door with a vengeance, and talking to herself. "There is no dependence to be put in anyone. I thought if I took her when she was so young, I could prevent her being crazy to get into the factory. But there is no such thing nowadays. I wish from my heart there was not a factory this side of France. I'll see if you won't come down." She entered the chamber at full speed, and behold, Sarah was among the missing. We will leave the old lady to make her own coffee, and inquire after Sarah's sudden disappearance. She prepared her bundle the night previously, and at dawn of day commenced a journey of 30 miles on foot without a cent in her purse. She walked with rapid haste the first 3 miles, and began to feel somewhat weary. As she was ascending a hill, she discovered a stagecoach behind her, and wept that she had not money to procure her passage. Well she knew that she could not walk so great a distance in one day, and she could not imagine where she might be obliged to stay through the night, for, thought she, no one would keep such a looking child as I am. The stage man, with the kindness peculiar to those of like calling, interrogated Sarah with, "Good morning, my little friend. How far are you walking?" She looked up at with big tears fast falling, and replied, "As far as Lowell, sir." "To Lowell? Walk to Lowell? It is near 30 miles. It will take you a week. You may ride with me, if you will, but I have no money," said Sarah. "I want none," replied her kind friend. "I will carry you without pay, for I contend with the old maxim that we should not kill those that try to live. and surely you are making a strong effort. He stepped down to open the stagecoach, and Sarah told him she was afraid the passengers would object to riding with her on account of her singular appearance. She was not a lady, with the usual paraphernalia of traveling, but only a barefooted girl with a small bundle. The passengers were interested in her behalf, and took the trouble to inquire the cause of her unusual appearance. She gave them a full and satisfactory history of herself and family, and the woman whose service she had left. They made a collection for her benefit, and one of the passengers, a factory girl, took the trouble to purchase a pair of shoes, hose, and other necessary articles at their first stopping place. How kind. When she arrived at Lowell, they inquired where she would stop. She told them at any good boarding house. As she had no acquaintance, her friend, the factory girl, invited her to stay with her, which invitation she unhesitatingly accepted. The next day, she went into the mill with her friend, who procured a place for her, much to her satisfaction. She commenced work the day following, and felt a new motive to action, for, thought she, I shall be paid for what I do now. Nothing worthy of notice occurred during the first 6 months. She worked every day, and spent her evenings in reading and writing. She wrote to her mother to send her younger sister, and they are still seen going to and from work together. Sarah has studied and faithfully learned the lessons of usefulness and practical benevolence. In my last interview with her, she expressed a source of pride in saying that although she had been a runaway beggar, she had been more fortunate than many within the circle of her acquaintance. And though there may be difficulties, yet a little perseverance will overcome them. I went by her invitation to the savings bank and learned that she had deposited $400 since the commencement of 1838. S.G.B. Sarah G. Bagley, Volume 1, 1841, pages 65 through 68. Wow. That's crazy, isn't it, Ajax? It is. Okay. I will be right back, as Panda wants to be let in, I think. Be right back. And welcome back for Tales of Factory Life number 2, The Orphaned Sisters. Catherine B. was the eldest of 3 sisters. Actual misfortune placed her parents in such an embarrassed state of affairs as to make it necessary for Catherine and a younger sister to support themselves at an early age. They had learned the pecuniary advantages of factory life from some of their young friends who had returned from a neighboring village, where they had been employed in a cotton mill. They earnestly requested the leave of their parents to go to Lowell to seek their fortune, as they termed such an adventure. After some deliberation, they gave their consent, but not without much solicitude for their safety. The evening previously to their departure, the family met around the altar of devotion, where, with the faltering voice of emotion, the benediction of heaven was invoked in behalf of the sisters, who were about to leave the paternal home for a residence among strangers. The morning the sisters left their much-loved home to obtain a livelihood, and they cast a wishful eye upon the friends they had left. A sadness stole unconsciously over their buoyant spirits, unknown to them before. They arrived at their place of destination, and were successful in finding employment. But what a great contrast from a quiet country home in the neighborhood of the White Mountains was the city of spindles to the sisters. They had been accustomed to listen only to nature's wild, unconscious song, o'er 1,000 hills that floats along. But here was confusion in all its forms, and truly, said Catherine, I should like to find myself alone for a brief space, that I might hold communion with my own heart undisturbed. Time soon rendered these scenes less annoying, and soon were our young friends able to fix their attention upon any subject within their range of thought. With the multitude around them, nothing of such importance occurred during the first year's stay in Lowell. Only they wrote often to their friends, and received letters from them often in return, abounding in such advice as their friends thought might be useful to them under the circumstances in which they were placed. They were requested to return in 1 year from the time they left and visit their friends, and had made their arrangements to be absent a few weeks, when a message was received from their mother for them to return as soon as possible, as their father was dangerously ill. Next morning they started, and arrived the day following. Their mother met them at the door with the sad intelligence of their father could survive but a few hours at most. He was very weak, and could only give them a few words of advice, and then bade them a long farewell. Their mother was nearly exhausted with fatigue, and constant watching had rendered her health very low. She was attacked by a like disease, and survived their father but a few weeks. The same grave opened to receive her that had been prepared for their father, and these sisters were truly orphans. Could this sad tale of suffering end here? But deep feeling of sympathy might be spared for the reader. In a good measure, but there are other scenes too interesting to leave without notice. A little brother and sister are here, and what shall be done with them? Catherine was to take charge of them by special request from their mother in her last moments, but how to provide for them a home was what most troubled her. The advice of friends was cheap. Everyone would bestow it gratuitously, and there were so many opinions as persons. Some gave it as their opinion, that it might be proper to throw them on the public charity. But to this, Catherine replied with her usual decision. Give them into the care of strangers? No, I will work till I die, before I will consent to such a course. If any one must suffer privation, let it fall on me, and not on these children, who have not yet learned that the cup of human existence is mixed with bitterness and sorrow. After having heard various opinions, they thought proper to ask advice of one who had manifested much kindness in their time of trouble, and he gave it his opinion that it would be well to board their little brother in a good family in the neighborhood, and take their little sister with them to Lowell, to which they consented. The little furniture and what else that remained was disposed of to settle some trifling debts that would unavoidably be contracted under the circumstances in which they were placed, and only a few things were reserved by them as a memorial of the past. And as they gave the last fond farewell to the home of their earliest years, how sad and dejected were the once buoyant spirits of the sisters. A kind neighbor bade them welcome to his house as their home during their short stay, and assisted them in arranging their affairs by procuring a boarding place for their brother, and rendering them such other assistance as they needed. The evening previously to their departure, Catherine went to the place sacred to memory, where lay the slumbering dust of all that we claim as friends under all circumstances. It was a lone, dreary spot, naught but the plaintive notes of the whippoorwill and the weaving branches of the willow were heard to break the silence of evening. She sat down upon the stone, near the quiet resting place of those loved friends. She gave full vent to the sorrowful emotions of her heart. She felt that there is a power to soothe in holding communion with the dead, and most fervently did she pray that she might be strengthened to fulfill the duties of a mother to those little ones who had been left in her care by the death of her parents. Next day, the sisters started again for Lowell, but not with the same thoughts and feelings as when they left before. They left now with the gloomy rejection that they had no home, no friends on whom they could rely. If sick or unfortunate, and in their care was a little sister and a brother still younger, whose board they were under obligation to pay, they had left behind. They arrived safely in Lowell, and with heavy hearts, for they thought it would be difficult for them to procure board for a child so young. They consulted a lady of their acquaintance, who very kindly offered to board her and look after her during their absence in the mill. And if he that giveth a cup of cold water shall in no wise lose his reward, how abundant is the satisfaction of that kind-hearted woman in having contributed so much to relieve the heavy burden of those orphan sisters. Heaven smiled upon their efforts, and good health and prosperity having attended them, but no one can suppose for a moment that they have not possessed a self-sacrificing spirit. The little sister was kept at school until she was old enough to earn her living, with a little assistance, and then she was sent into the country to reside with a friend and go to school a part of the time. The little brother is able to earn his living 6 months in the year, and the sisters furnish means to keep him at school the remainder. But let no one suppose that the care of these children has diminished the real happiness of the sisters, for they assured me it was a rich source of pleasure to review the past and call to mind the many times that they were obliged to spend all but a few shillings in providing for those little ones. And, said Catherine, it has taught me lessons of practical benevolence, for I have seen the time when it would cost an effort to give $50, be its object ever so praiseworthy. The sisters have of late been able to lay by a small sum for themselves, thereby evincing the utility of perseverance in well-doing. And though it may seem to many that their lot has been a hard one, still they are blessed with sunshine and flowers. And when next you see Catherine's name, it shall be in the list of marriages. S.G.B. Sarah G. Bagwell, Volume 1, 1841, page 263 to 266. And my last section for the evening read is called Editorial. Home in a Boarding House. Home in a boarding house is always different from home anywhere else, and home in a factory boarding house differs materially from home in any other. This difference is perceptible at the first entrance. There is peculiarity all its own in a great domicile, which usually shelters us. One might readily see by its accommodations, or rather its fixings, we beg pardon of diggings, for they are not always acknowledged as accommodations by the party most directly concerned, that it cannot be exactly a home, but only a place to eat and lodge in, a sort of rendezvous after a real home. The daily habitation is abandoned. This is tacitly acknowledged by the cognomen of the room, which is the only one common to all the boarders. This is the dining room, or, more properly, the eating room, for breakfast and supper, as well as dinner, are demolished in its precincts. This is always amply furnished with chairs and tables, though but little of anything else, for amidst all our deprivations, we have never been deprived of the privilege of sitting at our meals. Chairs, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on to 40. It is readily refreshing sometimes to go where there is only now and then a chair. This pleasure we can usually enjoy by leaving the dining room for our chambers, where there is not often a surplus of this article of furniture. This is crazy. But then there are always plenty of trunks, boxers, and company, which will answer for seats, and the bed is easily persuaded to stand proxy for a sofa. But these are all trifles compared to the perplexities to which we are subjected in other ways, and some of these might be remedied by the girls themselves. We now allude to the importunities of evening visitors, such as peddlers, candy and newspaper boys, shop dealers, shoe dealers, booksellers, and company, breaking in upon the only hours of leisure we can call our own, and proffering their articles with a pertinacity which will admit of no denial. That these evening salesmen are always unwelcome, we will not assert, but they are too often inclined to remain where they know they are considered a nuisance, and then they often forget if they ever knew the rules of politeness which should regulate all transient visitors. They deal about their hints, innuendos, and low cunning, as though a factory boarding house was what no boarding house should ever be. The remedy is entirely with the girls. Treat all these comers with politeness, truly ladylike, when they appear as gentlemen, but let your manners change to stern formality when they forget that they are in the company of respectable females. Never encourage evening traders unless you see some very good reason for doing so. The reason usually given is that they can trade cheaper with these men than with the storekeepers of Lowell. There is competition enough among the shopkeepers to keep things with a reasonable price, and good articles are seldom purchased cheaper of a peddler. But, say others, it is much more convenient for us, if we can be suited at home, to have our things brought us than to go out for them. Even where this is true, it should be remembered that each buyer is interrupting the occupations of 1, 2, or 3 dozen girls. But it is not wholly by traders that we are imposed upon. Sometimes an impudent charlatan, calling himself a practical phrenologist, intrudes upon us with the assurance that he can tell us what we are, even better than we know ourselves. And as far as they have any actual knowledge, or a tolerable Yankee faculty of guessing, they abuse it to pander to the vanity of those who are ready to believe they are possessed of every virtue and talent under the sun, because the phrenologist tells them so. Author unknown, Volume 3, 1842, page 69 and 70. So, what a crazy ass read that was. This time period is in the 1840s is just absolutely crazy, everybody. I mean, what the hell was going on then? I mean, you see that Ajax has the zoomies right now. He's currently running around the TV. He just, okay, that was quite the crazy time travel there. So I hope you had a good Thursday read. If you found this enjoyable, give me a like, subscribe, and share. And if you had any questions, I will get to you down in the comments below. So I'll see you pretties later. Have a good evening. Love you. Good night.